He thought he was just another passenger on a routine flight from New York to Los Angeles. First class, leather seats, champagne at his fingertips. This was luxury travel at its finest, but what happened next turned out to be anything but ordinary. It all started with one careless comment, a single insult that would change everything for him. You see, sometimes you don't know who you're dealing with until it's too late. The man's name was Jake Harper. He wasn't exactly famous, but he liked to think of himself as someone important. A successful entrepreneur in his mid-30s, Jake had built a small tech company from scratch. While he wasn't rolling in billions like Elon Musk, he still considered himself pretty accomplished. That day, Jake decided to treat himself to a first-class ticket after closing a major deal. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Jake settled into his seat near the front of the cabin. The interior was sleek and modern, with soft lighting and wide screens playing calming music. Stewardesses moved gracefully between rows, offering drinks and snacks. Everything about the setting screamed wealth and privilege. Little did Jake know, this flight would test how far his confidence and ignorance could carry him. About halfway through the flight, Jake found himself scrolling through social media on his phone. His eyes landed on an article about Elon Musk, the billionaire CEO of SpaceX and Tesla. The headline read, "Elon Musk plans to colonize Mars by 2050. Jake snorted aloud, drawing a few curious glances from nearby passengers. "Please," he muttered under his breath, loud enough for those around him to hear. "This guy talks big, but half of what he says never happens. All talk and no action." His neighbor in the seat beside him, a tall man with short, neatly trimmed hair, turned toward Jake with a polite smile. "Excuse me," the stranger said, "but I couldn't help overhearing. Are you referring to Elon Musk?" Jake glanced at the man briefly before nodding. "Yeah, that's right. People make such a fuss over him like he's some kind of genius. But let's face it, he's just good at marketing himself." The stranger tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "Interesting perspective," he replied calmly. "Though I must admit I've always admired his vision." Jake smirked. "Vision? Sure, if you call dreaming about living on Mars vision. Give me a break." For a moment there was silence between them. Then the stranger chuckled softly, shaking his head as though amused. "Well, opinions vary, I suppose." At the time, Jake didn't think much of the exchange. He went back to browsing his phone, assuming the conversation was over. But little did he know, this brief interaction had set off a chain of events he'd soon regret deeply. As the flight continued, Jake tried to focus on work emails and updates from his company, but every now and then, he felt the weight of the stranger's gaze resting on him. It wasn't overt or aggressive, just subtle enough to make Jake feel uneasy. He shrugged it off, telling himself it was probably nothing. Later, during dinner service, the stewardess approached their row with trays of gourmet meals. The stranger ordered a filet mignon while Jake opted for salmon. As they ate, the man struck up another conversation. "You seem very passionate about your views," the stranger said casually, sipping his wine. "Do you mind sharing more about why you think Elon Musk isn't all he's cracked up to be?" Jake hesitated for a second, but decided to play along. "It's not just one thing," he explained. "I mean, sure, he's done some cool stuff, but most of his projects are either delayed or overhyped. Take Tesla, for example. Everyone acts like it's revolutionizing the car industry, but other companies have been making electric cars longer than he has." The stranger raised an eyebrow. "That's an interesting point," he admitted. "But don't you think innovation takes time? Not everything happens overnight." Jake leaned back in his seat, crossing his arms. "Maybe, or maybe people give him too much credit because he's rich and famous. If someone else came up with the same ideas, no one would care." This time, the stranger didn't respond right away. Instead, he finished his meal in silence, leaving Jake wondering if he'd offended him. But as the hours passed, the unease grew stronger. There was something about this man that Jake couldn't quite put his finger on, and it made him increasingly uncomfortable. By the time the plane began its descent into Los Angeles, Jake was ready to breathe a sigh of relief. Finally, this awkward encounter would be over. Or so he thought. As the plane taxied toward the gate, the cabin buzzed with anticipation. Passengers gathered their belongings, preparing to disembark. Jake grabbed his laptop and phone, eager to stretch his legs after the long flight. But just as he stood up, the stranger stopped him with a gentle hand on his arm. "Before we part ways," the man said, his voice calm but firm, "there's something I want to show you." Jake frowned. "What do you mean?" The stranger reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small business card. He handed it to Jake, who examined it closely. The logo was simple yet unmistakable. A sleek design featuring the word SpaceX. Beneath it, in bold letters, read the name Elon Musk. Jake froze, his blood running cold. "Wait, what?" he stammered, looking up at the man beside him. The stranger smiled faintly, though there was a hint of amusement in his eyes. "Yes, that's right. My name is Elon Musk, and you've spent the last few hours criticizing me without realizing who you were talking to." For a moment, the entire world seemed to stop spinning. Jake felt his face flush with embarrassment and panic. His mind raced, searching for something, anything to say. But all that came out was a weak, Elon leaned closer, lowering his voice so only Jake could hear. "Don't worry," he said with a chuckle. "I'm not here to lecture you. Everyone is entitled to their opinions. But perhaps next time, you might consider doing a little research before dismissing someone's achievements." Jake nodded frantically, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "You're absolutely right," he managed to choke out. "I had no idea. It won't happen again, I promise." With that, Elon stood up and collected his things, giving Jake one last nod before heading toward the exit. As the billionaire walked away, Jake sank back into his seat, his heart pounding in his chest. How could he have been so foolish? And more importantly, what would happen now? After Elon Musk left, Jake sat frozen in his seat, replaying the conversation in his mind. He couldn't believe he had insulted one of the most powerful men in the world, and to his face, no less. What if Elon decided to ruin his life? With just a few phone calls, the billionaire could crush Jake's small tech company without breaking a sweat. As the other passengers disembarked, Jake remained glued to his seat, too terrified to move. Finally, a stewardess approached him. "Sir," she said gently, "we need to clean the cabin now. Are you okay?" Jake forced himself to stand, muttering something about being fine. He shuffled off the plane, clutching his belongings tightly. Once outside, he took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. Maybe Elon wouldn't remember him. After all, billionaires probably dealt with rude people all the time. Surely, Jake wasn't worth wasting energy on. But as he made his way through the airport terminal, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Pulling it out, Jake saw an email notification from an unfamiliar address. His stomach dropped as he opened the message. Subject: "A lesson in humility. Dear Mr. Harper, I hope this message finds you well. During our recent flight together, you expressed some strong opinions about my work. While I appreciate healthy debate, I thought it might be beneficial for you to learn more about the industries I'm involved in. Attached is a list of recommended reading materials that cover topics ranging from renewable energy to space exploration. Consider it a gift, and perhaps a chance to reconsider your views. Best regards, Elon Musk." Jake stared at the screen, stunned. Instead of punishing him, Elon had sent him resources to educate himself. It was both generous and humbling. Feeling a mix of gratitude and shame, Jake promised himself to read every word of those materials. Still, the incident lingered in his mind. From now on, he vowed to think twice before speaking so harshly about anyone, especially someone sitting right next to him. Months later, Jake found himself attending a tech conference in San Francisco. To his surprise, he was seated at the same table as Elon Musk during a networking dinner. This time, instead of avoiding eye contact, Jake mustered the courage to approach him. "Mr. Musk," Jake began nervously, "I owe you an apology. That day on the plane, I said some things I shouldn't have. I've spent the past few months learning from the materials you recommended, and I realize now how wrong I was. Elon looked up from his plate, smiling warmly. Apology accepted, he replied. We all make mistakes. The important thing is that you're willing to grow. Jake nodded, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. Thank you for giving me a second chance, he said sincerely, and thank you for inspiring me to think differently. As the evening continued, Jake discovered that Elon wasn't just a billionaire genius, he was also approachable, kind, and genuinely interested in helping others succeed. By the end of the night, Jake left the conference not only with newfound knowledge, but also with a fresh perspective on life. From then on, Jake became a vocal supporter of innovation and progress, often crediting Elon Musk for teaching him a valuable lesson: never underestimate the power of humility, and always choose your words wisely. So, what do you think? Could you imagine being in Jake's shoes? Let me know in the comments below. Have you ever insulted someone without realizing who they really were? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on more stories like this one.